Arabia Felix is the title of the book that Bertram Thomas wrote after his successful crossing of the biggest sand desert on earth, the Rub al Khali, or the Empty Quarter, in 1931. And you can go as far back as 1482, when Ptolemy, the Greek astronomer and cartographer, named the southern part of Arabia as Arabia Felix, and that's mostly Yemen and southern Oman. And it clearly left an impression on Thomas, as it did on the sailors and the travellers in Ptolemy's time, because southern Oman is unlike anything else in Arabia, which is why 1 million visitors come here for the Kharif, for the monsoon festival in the summer months. And we are now in the land of Arabia Felix, and it's absolutely beautiful. The trees around us are bounding with life. The first scops owl, so the sun is just setting, the sky is pink and yellow to the south and to the west, and behind me in the trees I can hear a few scops owls starting to call. And it's paradise in southern Arabia, which is why 1 million visitors come here for the Kharif, the monsoon festival in Salalah, every summer in July, August and September, when this part of Arabia is kissed by the monsoon and turns vivid green. It's absolutely beautiful, and I would say it's one of my favourite places in the world. And when the famous British explorer Ranulph Find was asked by the Observer newspaper many years ago, where in the world would you most like to be if you could be anywhere right now? And his response, with all the places that he's travelled to, was southern Oman. But the day I may be sitting here, sitting under trees and surrounded by crickets and owls calling and birds, but the day didn't start like that. And this is one of the beauties of Oman, this incredible diversity of landscape and life. And we started the day on the dry sort of windward side, the north side of the mountains, and we've ended here overlooking the Indian Ocean once again. And Thomas wrote beautifully in his paper to the Royal Geographical Society in 1932. His paper was called The Southeast Borderlands of the Rub al Khali. And he said, behind me is now, so he'd just come over the mountains that we've come over today. But his words are much better than mine. He said, behind is the rainless, arid desert. Ahead, meadow country of the seaward slopes and the coastal plains of Dhofar, which received the bountiful 3-month summer rainfall of the southwest monsoon. And that's where I'm sitting right now. The monsoon ended about 4 months ago, so everything's a bit browner and drier now. But in September and October, when the fog disappears and the mist disappears and the sun comes out again, this land is vivid green and absolutely abundant wildlife. So we're now in the home of the Arabian leopard. We have striped hyenas around us in the night tonight. We'll have wolves. We have Arabian cobra. We have porcupine. You wouldn't think you're in the Middle East and Arabia, but you are. We saw this afternoon a bird that I think has the most beautiful name of any bird in the world. It's called the African paradise flycatcher, and we saw a beautiful, colourful male this afternoon. So we started the morning though to the north of the mountain. So I'm now on pretty much on the top, just looking to the south, and I can just about see the sea. But we started in the north, and for Thomas, really now, it was a period of great excitement because he was very, very close to Journey's End and Dhofar. And it was the first time that he'd seen a frankincense tree. He'd crossed all of the coastal areas that we've been following for the last 24, 25 days. And he wrote in his diary that I have in front of me, he said, an hour short of the Wadi, we saw the first frankincense tree. In appearance, a young sapling with no central trunk, but a clump of branches springing out from near the ground, ash-coloured bark and studded with diminutive, crumply leaves. Local camels will eat these leaves. He said that one of his team, Hamuda, dismounted and bought a specimen of frankincense in the raw condition on his dagger blade for me to see. It resembled lard of a green transparent colour and was very fragrant. The process is that the collectors, women as well as men, make a slight incision in the bark from which the sap exudes, and a week later they return to scrape off the dried resinous substance, pear-shaped and aromatic, and send it to the coast for export. In ancient times, this magical produce was used by the Egyptians in the process of mummifying sacred bodies, and it still serves a religious purpose, but is now sent east to the temples of India. So we left those frankincense trees this morning and drove over the mountain past a military checkpoint, had a cup of coffee, as is always the way with the young lads at the military checkpost who waved us through. And they're there for no other purpose than just to give people support to get into difficulty, because it is quite a remote area. Where we camped last night, we saw absolutely nobody, not a light in any direction. We had a red fox on the camera trap with no tail, and our first bat swooping in front of the camera trap. But other than that, that was it. So a very rocky, steep ascent over the mountain onto the plateau at the top, but still not many trees. Very, very arid, like you're driving on Mars. But all of a sudden, you're surrounded by enormous fig trees and acacia trees, and you're back into the frankincense again. And I was very keen to show the team something that's pretty special here. There are a few other places in Oman where these things grow, but the main concentration is here. I wanted the team to see the largest living thing in Oman on land, because I think maybe the humpback whale might be larger, but I don't think so. I think these things are the largest things. So we drove to a community called Tawiyater. We had some lunch and then descended a steep series of hairpin bends down a wadi called Wadi Hanna, and this wadi is thickly forested. You wouldn't believe you're in Arabia. And there we parked and dropped down into the wadi bed itself, and there you see these beautiful trees called baobab trees, utterly enormous. The oldest ones are considered to be several thousand years old and about 50 to 60 metres in height. They are utterly huge trees, and the trunk at the bottom must be about 6 or 7 metres round, utterly enormous, and there's about 15 or 20 of them in close proximity. For some reason, I don't know why, but I'm going to find out. I'm going to message a friend of mine who's a botanist in the Oman Botanical Gardens and try and find out why Wadi Hanna is the botanical hotspot for these beautiful, beautiful baobab trees, which of course we usually tend to associate with Madagascar and Africa rather than Arabia. But it just made us think that just really 3 or 4 days ago we were surrounded by nothing but sand on the southern edge of the Rub al Khali, and here we are now surrounded by forest with bats flying around, owls calling, trees as big as 4 or 5 story buildings, 50 metres high. These trees are huge, and such is the variety of life and the speed with which it changes. The other thing we saw this morning was just dozens and dozens of archaeological remains of more and more triliths. We saw them about 4 or 5 days ago. If you go onto the website, jewelofarabiaexpedition.com, go to the section called Inspiration, and you'll see the inspiring archaeological lecturer, Dr. Jeff Rose, a Nat Geo explorer. There'll be 2 video clips if you scroll down that page of the website, and you'll hear Jeff giving his theory on why these triliths were built. We did see several the other day. They were fenced off to be protected by the Ministry of Heritage, but the ones today, they were absolutely everywhere, and it was just lovely to get a bit closer because they weren't fenced off, because the air is completely remote and just utterly beautiful. So we're now around the fire. It's about 7 o'clock. There's still a lovely golden colour to the sky to the south and to the west here. We're just making plans for tomorrow, because tomorrow is probably going to be our last day walking on the Jewel of Arabia expedition, because we then have much to do. The governor of Dhofar, the province here in the south, has organised a grand reception for us, and we're really looking forward to that. We have absolutely no idea what's going to be involved, but we've been told we have to be at a place by a certain time on the 1st of February. It's the day after tomorrow, so we've got to get ourselves a bit of a shave and a scrub up and a shower somewhere to be reasonably presentable, and try and find an iron to try and iron a t-shirt or two. So that's going to be a grand affair, and then we're looking forward to meeting and greeting some young explorers from the British school Salalah. And Vicky Price, the principal, the head teacher there, is bringing a group of young explorers to us. We found a nice campsite up here under the trees in the hills that we think the school bus will be able to get to. And we're looking forward to meeting the students there. If you cast your ears back through the podcasts to day 3 or 4 of Jewel of Arabia, you'll remember we met the students of the British school Muscat when we started. We'll be meeting the students of the British school Salalah, and then the day after, Nigel and Anna and I will be going in to speak to the students in the school, because not everyone can come here to see us up in the hills. And Dhikra and Ibrahim will be going to talk to the Omani Scouts and Guides Association and some Omani children who are coming along. Schools are closed at the moment in Oman for national exams, but some very kind people at the Ministry of Education have got a big group together to come and listen to what Dhikra and Ibrahim have got to say about the Jewel of Arabia. So that leaves tomorrow as our last day of walking, and this was the case for Thomas also. The stories will not stop for us. The podcasts will keep coming because we've got much to talk about still. But for Thomas, the last day for him was descending into a steep-sided, wooded wadi with permanent water at the bottom that the Bedouin were very keen, his Bedouin companions were very keen that he see, a place called Wadi Darbat, which has now evolved into quite a major tourist attraction here because of the fact that it does hold water all year round and remains pretty green all year round. But at the seaward end of that wadi, there's an enormous precipice, a cliff, over which, when the rains do come, you have an enormous waterfall. And Thomas was very keen to go and see the abyss of Wadi Darbat. So that will be where we will be heading tomorrow, to the abyss of Wadi Darbat. And for us then, it'll be a matter of backtracking up into the hills, just double checking everything's ready for the next day, for us to make a speedy departure into Salalah, to shower, scrub up, get a haircut, get a shave, and get ourselves ready for our greeting with the governor and some members of the Omani Ministry of Heritage and Tourism, which we're looking forward to hugely.